Afternoon, everyone. I hope that you've all enjoyed this great lineup of this conference, and I'm so excited to be part of this conference. So my name is Boitshoko Phalatse. It's a bit of a mouthful, but it's easier read than hearing it. So Boitshoko Phalatse, and what we are going to talk about today is the key soft skills to successfully manage technology initiatives. Before we get started, I will just give you a little bit of background about myself. I currently work at Berklee College of Music as an enterprise project manager, and I've worked in various industries, investment banking, telecommunications, management consulting, and have now recently started working in higher ed, which is really interesting times to be in, especially around the pandemic. The types of projects that I've worked on is on regulatory requirements project, data integration, cloud migration projects, data automation, process improvement. So really exciting projects to grow the organizations and save on costs as well. My career path, I started off as, I've had various roles in technology. I started off as a database administrator / programmer, and then moved into a test analysis position, and then did a bit of business analysis, and now have settled in project management, which is really exciting. And really the roles that I've played have enabled me to be able to do my job more effectively as a project manager. In addition, I started an EdTech startup program to promote education and technology in rural communities. I'm currently based in Boston, but I am originally from South Africa. All right, so to get started, I was hoping, unfortunately, I didn't get enough time to set a poll on Zoom, but as a project manager, I had a backup plan, and I said, you know what, let me see if I can bring the screen, put this on the presentation as well. So, I thought it would be good to do a poll on why projects fail and how all this ties up to soft skills and applying project management principles. And what I would like to do is, to just have everyone have a look at this is just a few of some of the reasons why projects fail. There's many reasons, but these are the most popular ones why projects fail. And I'd like you to just have a look at some of these and select your top three or just as many as you want on why you think projects fail. I'll just give it a few seconds or so, and then we'll just talk about that. And if you want, so I have my mobile on, and I should be able to see some of the chat room, some of the messages that are coming through, but I know Kyle will be helping me as well. So if you want to put in some of your responses on the chat, you can do that. Certainly do that as well. All right, so let's see. I'm not seeing any responses on why from people, but I can just go through that and just base it on some of my top three and what I've seen along the way. So what I've done is, or what I usually do when I look at all this list is categorize it into people, processes, and communication. And the reason I do that, if we look at the first two, which is unclear goals and objective and unrealistic expectation, all of these two really relate to people and also communication. So from a people perspective, If you are not really setting up solid relationships with your stakeholders, then you are in that space of having unrealistic expectations from your stakeholders. Or at the beginning of a project, if you are not collaborating or even communicating with your stakeholders on setting up clear goals and objectives, that can be an issue as well. So all of these really, what they boil down to is communication as well. All 8 of these that I've put in place. We have poor planning and scope creeps. All of this, again, is if you are not spending enough time in your project planning and really communicating with your stakeholders, then you really are in that space to engage and experience scope creeps as well. So, let's talk about why soft skills, are technical skills or hard skills being replaced by soft skills. Have soft skills become more important? And that's not to say soft skills have become more important, but in an industry that is constantly evolving, where we must respond quicker and more effectively, soft skills are no longer optional, but they're essential. Now, where hard skills were traditionally perceived as core skills, company leaders are now viewing soft skills as core skills. As I mentioned earlier, this is not to say that one is more important than the other, but the two are equally as important and they complement each other. Because again, we're in an industry where we need to pivot faster during uncertainties and deal with changes to meet demand or innovate to respond to changes. This requires us to evolve as well in being technically savvy and requires an increase in technology talent. Therefore, the focus is on obtaining technical skills, skills that allow us to deliver solutions. We have capabilities and the know-how of what functionality or code needs to be in place to get our solution to work. But the big question is, when you're working in a team of individuals, talented individuals, and each team member knows what needs to be done and how for their specific task, the question is, how do we consolidate efforts across the spectrum to achieve the overall desired goal? Having the ability to code, use specialized software or equipment is necessary, but a strong soft skills will yield greater return and allow us to thrive in integrated business. I put this photograph here because I think it illustrates the initial stage of a project where there's a lot of moving pieces and much coordination is required and structuring. And we need to bring together and integrate efforts to align with the big picture and achieve the overall goals. So this means people working together, no matter how knowledgeable they are in their respective spaces. Lack of soft skill leads to team friction, missed deadlines, and lack of direction, like this. So I saw this on LinkedIn the other day and I said, wow, this will be really perfect for the presentation today, because as you can see, what the client, there's really a miscommunication here and the chain in communication has, really gone off track, where what the client is asking and what the business analyst is putting together. And by the time it gets to the software developer or the coder, really it's definitely something that was not required by the client. Or in some cases, a customer requesting a Rolls Royce and instead obtaining this or getting this. So let's move into the soft skills. Let's take a look at some of these soft skills. And I will start with communication. So ability to communicate both verbally and in written forms. And what this means really is, if we're talking about verbally, speaking and being able to articulate requirements, or being able to articulate in a clear and concise manner, including listening as well. Communication is no longer a nice to have. Comprehending both the business lingo and technical lingo, and being bilingual to relay complex ideas in ways that can be understood by your audience. So whether the end user has no technical background, or you have a technical individual who's less knowledgeable in the business acumen. Now, a lot of mistakes that sometimes we make as project leads or project managers is that we have to know it all, and we need to be the SMEs. And this is a mistake that I made, at the early stages of my career. And really, this is where teamwork comes in, and trusting your team comes in. I'm often made fun of in meetings, and people saying, "Oh, if you see, you've brought an army in to the meetings." Or before I walk into a meeting, I'll joke and say, "I've brought backup." And this is because if you are dealing with, as a project manager, I can be knowledgeable in some, but I'm not an expert. I can be knowledgeable in technical terms as well, in the technology as well. But in what's good is to bring in the real experts as well. So to be able to, as an example, one of the projects that I'm working on, which is a cloud migration project and system integration, and we've been working with our vendor, and there's been issues around connectivity and some of the configuration as well. So this is really where you make sure that you're bringing in the right individuals to talk to each other. Collaboration in diverse groups enables creativity and innovation to thrive. And this reduces group thinking and promotes thinking outside the box. As professionals in this industry, embracing uncertainties and disruption comes as part of navigating the volatility, and should be regarded as an opportunity to innovate, be creative, and think outside the box. Adaptation and flexibility to pivot faster and be quick on our feet. I work in higher ed, and the pandemic is, it's a really good example of how we've had to quickly change directions to accommodate for remote learning. Berklee College of Music is a performing arts and music school, meaning that our students need to be interacting, they need to be engaging, they need to be physically on the ground in order to be taught, because this is more experiential learning and practical skills that they need to gain. So we've really had to pivot and work faster in working with our students and our instructors as well, to allow them to be able to provide these skills remotely to our students by making sure that the classrooms, right now we in some cases will have instructors in a classroom where they are by themselves and performing with the students as well, with the students being remote. So these are some of the things that that we've done in pivoting. And in some cases, really, this brings up new opportunities. So as we have to pivot to new things, it brings new opportunities. An example that we might all relate to is bums on seats. Now that we all work remotely, in some organizations, traditional organizations, that really thought that employees couldn't be productive. Now we are more effective working from home, and organizations are saving on bums on seats because we're all working from home. So again, some of these embracing uncertainties and some of these disruptions, we can view them as opportunities. As I'm going along this, are there any questions that we have? Good. All right. So Moving on to the project management principles. You know, project management to me is a transferable skill and is valuable skill in leading projects. It's both an art and a science, and applying its principles in technology initiatives lead to successful delivery of projects. So as an art, it is the ability to lead people, conflict resolution, make decisions with little or insufficient information. I'm sure some of us have experienced this. Moving the project forward sometimes with ambiguity or unknowns and uncertainties, and paying attention to the details, but have a bigger picture. These all, from an art perspective, these all tie to collaboration, communication, flexibility, and adaptation, empathy, building strong relationships. So from a project management perspective, when we look at the art component of it, this all ties in to the soft skills, because now you are working with people and your technical skills have not yet come into play. And this actually is a good time for us to move into the science component of it. And when we look at the science component of it, these are actually your technical skills and ability to use your PM tools. So apply methodologies like your SDLC, Agile, applying project controls like your critical path, matrix measures, and tracking of tasks, status risk, and estimated cost to complete the project. So this is where you're really scheduling your project and using your Gantt chart, doing your resource planning as well. And this is where, as a project manager or as a project lead, you need to be skillful in using some of these tools, going in and using SharePoint or Smartsheet or Microsoft Project. So this is really the science component of it. And as we do this, some of the challenges as project leads or as project managers is that we have the responsibility and we have to be accountable for delivering the outcome, but we really have no authority. So this makes it a little bit tricky because we have individuals that are allocated to a project, but these individuals have their full-time responsibilities and full-time jobs and have their own dedicated managers. So in things like non-delivery in individuals, it becomes hard as a project manager to lead these teams. And that's why communication is so important at inception of the project, really setting up expectations, making sure that everyone understands what the goals are and what the objectives are, and that we have a common goal in mind. And that's why this is so important, to be able to avoid these kind of challenges as a project manager. You know, the other thing as well is, as far as you go, we're only responsible for the delivery on the project. And you know, what I mean by this is that when it comes to decision making as project managers, you know, we can go and put as much information as we can. However, at the end of it, the decision is made by leaderships. So you should, we're responsible to communicate these decisions to our leaderships or senior managers as well. So you can't exactly pull the plug on the project. And this is where the challenge comes in, where we have the responsibility and the accountability, but really no authority of either pulling the plug or authority over allocated resources. Let's look at the project management life cycle and effort spent on the various phases. So from a time and activity perspective, I want to particularly focus on the planning phase of the project. But let me just take a step back and really just look at this the life cycle. So you can see on we have the 5 phases of project management. And then we have on the x-axis, we have the start and finish, which is the timeline. And then we have on the y-axis, the level of processes and interaction. So these are all the activities that are related or that are incorporated into that particular phase. You can see at the beginning of the project where we're really initiating the project, very few activities are involved in this phase, and the timing in this phase is fairly short because we are busy putting together a project brief or a charter. We are outlining the business case and approach. So we are identifying stakeholders, the scope, the objective, the resources that we will need, and what the major tasks are. So this is a very brief documentation where it's a start of a project, and it's really initiating to say, you know what, go ahead and get started. We have allocated budget for this project. And when we move on to the planning process, or the planning phase of a project, this is where we start getting more into the detail about putting the business case together and putting more details and more meat into the business case. So now we're really looking at justifying this business case, putting together a communication plan, roles and responsibility. And in this stage, we're assembling a team. We're putting together time and cost estimates, which become a schedule and a budget. And we're setting up our kickoff meetings with our team. We're doing a detailed stakeholder analysis to see which stakeholders will be impacted. And when we're looking at this life cycle, you can see that really there is a lot of activities. There's quite a few activities that happen in the planning phase compared to the initiation phase. And the timeline around that, really, that it takes quite a long time versus your initiation phase. Moving into your execution phase, and this is where you're managing the project and directing the project. So you are now looking at your risks, your organization, your progress, your changes, and quality. And in addition to that, you are monitoring your project as well, doing your team meetings, progress updates, and managing issues and risks. And you can see that there's a dotted line on the execution phase, because you are really, this is in parallel while you're doing your execution and your monitoring and controlling. These are all done in parallel. And the planning phase, it goes on in terms of from a timeline perspective. You know, it does, once we've started planning, this does not, the project initiation document or the planning document that we've put together, this does not just, once it's completed and we're moving into execution, we're not putting this document away and saying, you know what, we're all done with that. Because at the beginning of the project, when we were planning, we would have had to think about things like the consideration and dependencies, things like risk, potential issues, and what are some of the depending projects as well. So this is something that we have to keep track on as we go along on throughout our life cycle of the project. And then we move on to closure, which is your lessons learned. And you are evaluating the deliverables against success matrix. You're handing over to the operational team and ensuring that we have SLAs in place or OLAs in place, and recognizing the team's efforts and accomplishments. Before we move on from this slide, I just want to highlight and go back to the planning phase, which is, you know, the reason why I wanted us to go through this this life cycle, is that from a time and an activities perspective, you know, focusing on the planning phase, because this is at times a phase that we rush through and skip really important steps because we are rushing to provide or building a solution. But if we really want to avoid pitfalls or reduce roadblocks, spending a little bit more time and investing in the planning phase yields favorable results. At the beginning of the presentation, we took a poll. We we tried to take a poll that listed poor planning as one of the reasons projects failed. I've experienced rushing through this phase, and the project either got canned at execution phase. And the reason we were, just to go into more details about this project, I was working at the bank and we were implementing the Dodd-Frank regulation, and this was basically to put controls in place for our dealing room control. So to be able to track and monitor our daily trades, track and monitor all the trades that were canceled, trades that were late, and just to create accountability with our traders or the dealing room control or dealing room desk. And this project had already been implemented in our UK office, however, not in our African regions. And we spent a lot of time. We went through the initiation phase, we went through the planning phase, and when we got to execution, we really did not have stakeholder buy-in. And that's because, and sometimes this is from a political perspective as well, where we rush in to implement a solution because another area has implemented it, it's working for them, and therefore it should work for everyone. When we got to the execution of the project, really the senior managers did not see how this project would work for them. We did not have the right processes in place. Africa was using multiple platforms to track the trading and the dealing rooms as well. So we had multiple platforms to track all of that, commodities, interest rates, swaps, and things like that. So at the end of it, really, we had to can the project. Actually, I don't want to use the word can the project, but postpone the project and kind of go back to the drawing board to see how we can look for ways to be able to track the trades, the daily trades. So something that worked for the UK office might not be something that works for the African office, and therefore we have to go back. But a lot of money had already been spent on that. We had a consultant and a BA that was already putting requirements together. So that's also one of the things. And as a project manager, really, we shouldn't feel, or a project lead, we shouldn't feel the pressure to continue going. It's okay sometimes to push back and say, well, you know what, at the end of it, you don't want to produce a solution that will not be used at the end of it. So it's okay to push back. So, with the help of the project sponsor as well and working with the team, we're able to push back and say, it looks like we need to take a step back on this project. So doing a lot of work and investing in your planning stage is really important in making sure that you do your proper stakeholder analysis, make sure that you involved all the impacted stakeholders and the right teams as well. So traits for managing and leading projects. I always get asked, and I use this one word interchangeably in terms of, what do you do? And I say, I'm an implementer, I'm a doer, or I'm a connector or a facilitator. So instead of just saying I'm a project manager, I say, you know what, I'm a connector or facilitator. And during the early stages of my career, and I know I always used to hate hearing this, where project management or even business analysis was regarded as glorified secretaries. And as I went along in my career, I kind of got to understand this, because I feel like we really are, at the end of it, a facilitator and a connector, making sure that you have the right individuals talking to each other, and at the end of it, implementing the solution. So getting the right people in a room, and getting them to talk about how do we solve some of these issues. As I've been going through, through my careers, and talking to individuals, and through mentorships as well, these are some of the important traits that I've picked up from individuals that are leading projects or project managers. Is you need to be curious, and moving away. When I first started out as a project manager, I kind of was started questioning it, whether this was something that I wanted to do, because I did not want to be that person that just took notes, set up meetings, or did meeting minutes and stuff like that. I wanted to be more involved, and that means being more curious, asking questions, and pushing back, and challenging the status quo. The other thing is building strong relationships, and I can't tell you how much this has saved me in so many ways. Building strong relationships with your stakeholders, especially clients and the business team, is always good, because at the end of it, when things do go wrong, you've built such a strong relationships, and these individuals know that you have created a common goal. And even though things on the project are not going well, they have trust that you have your best intentions in terms of bringing them a solution that works. Good verbal and written communicator. You need to have really good written communication skills, and then being able to lead diverse teams with empathy and open-mindedness. That definitely helps to be in a team where your team really feels like they're in an inclusive environment. They are in an environment that they can speak freely, and that really helps with creating creativity, or having creativity in the team, and innovation as well, because you have created an environment that is safe, where individuals feel like they can challenge some of the things, and in return actually also come up with things to how to do things better. When you're leading a project, you become a mentor. You engage individuals and motivate them. So especially when things are going wrong in a project, this is a time, as much as you might also not feel in your most positive, this is the time to be bringing the team together, mentoring teams, and motivating them as well. Ability to influence teams rather than authority. At the beginning of, I once had a manager who said to me, I was being a manager and he needed me to be a leader. And I never really quite understood what that meant for quite a while, and really it was, I was that person that I needed to check things off my list without really working on influencing teams, and listening to them as well, and making it an inclusive environment. You need to be able to negotiate in reaching agreements with individuals. Being politically savvy and diplomatic. This is something that I still continue to work on. It involves a lot of having a thick skin in that. Resilience as well when things go wrong with the project. Being able to still keep going, being a critical thinker and forward thinking outside the box. When you're putting a solution, this is where also during planning, we are thinking about potential things that could go wrong. And if they did go wrong, what are some of the mitigations? What is the mitigation plan for that? And as I mentioned earlier, flexibility and adaptability, and being able to prioritize. Now, what I did I actually included this. And I think, you know, in any team, you want to encourage collaboration and team culture to avoid, I hope that this works. So the reason that I included this, I was watching this with my husband a few weeks ago, and I said, "Wow, this would be great for the presentation," because you can see even with villains or even in teams, really, you want to encourage a team that collaborates and teamwork as well. So even with villains, you can see that you can't be just thinking for yourself and you know, bringing. And I know during the pandemic, yes, we should be, you know, we want to put our masks on first, but you can see in this clip that they're all working together. But not really, because one person is looking at saving themselves and just themselves only, and not from a team perspective. I'll play that one more time. And that was it for me. I have not been looking at some of these any comments, so I will actually stop sharing my screen, and we can have a conversation. Do we have anyone with any questions? Any individuals leading projects at this point?
I'll jump in just a second. Remind people that there is the session Q&A tab in Whova, that you can type questions in there and we can answer them. Otherwise, feel free to unmute yourself and jump in with any questions if you're in Zoom.
So I'm actually curious to know what industry some of the folks that have joined us are in.
I'm a developer, but I am in the healthcare integration space. So my company isn't directly in healthcare, but we are kind of a software company that helps healthcare companies in that space communicate with each other. So we're within that space, but not quite directly.
Okay, okay. Oh, great. And I mean, so do you, you know, and I always say, even with the developers, I mean, I've worked with some of the most amazing developers and programmers as well, who, and sometimes I ask myself, you guys don't even need a project manager. Like you're self-sufficient, you know what needs to be done, and you really are driving, you know, driving projects. So yeah, I wanted to hear if there's, you know, being anyone that's worked on projects where you've had to lead teams, and what are some of the challenges you feel like you've experienced, and whether you think soft skills are actually equally as important.
Yeah, I definitely hugely important. You can be the smartest person in the room, but if you don't know how to communicate effectively and how to interact with people, it's all wasted and irrelevant because you aren't able to share those talents with anyone else. It does look like we did have one question come in from Andrew. Do you have any suggestions for someone without power in an organization trying to affect change in the project planning process?
Okay, can you repeat that? Do I have any? I missed the first part.
Yeah, their question was, do you have any suggestions on someone without power in an organization trying to affect change in the project planning process?
Yeah, yeah, that's an interesting one, and I would say this is where building strong relationships and making sure that how do you connect with those individuals that are influential? Starting to identify individuals that could potentially buy into. Everyone wants to know what's in it for me, so identifying those individuals that could potentially buy into the change that you're trying to make, especially in the planning process, and getting them to kind of be your voice, and working to influence other individuals as well. So I say it takes just that one person that you can try to be in your team or on your side, working with them, and I've seen that works. You have to be clever in identifying those individuals, but doing it on your own or individual that does not really have that much influence in the organization to try and get something, that doesn't always go okay. Things don't always go as you'd want them to. I hope that answers your question, Andrew. All right, so let me look at, well, we still have a few more minutes for anyone that has any questions. So don't be shy, plug them into the chat room, or otherwise, connect with me on LinkedIn if you have any questions after this. I'd love to connect with all of you, and I hope that you enjoy the rest of the conference.